I felt the tingle of salt air touch my face. I gulped in a breath. My legs were still wedged, or so I thought. As I shifted, fully expecting a struggle between stone, my body rolled out prone. I was free. Did the passageway expand? Ahead of me was further darkness. I was unsure of what I was entering, but that smell, it was like the ocean. Was I outside? Impossible, right? I'd descended hundreds, maybe thousands of feet below the surface. Which posed another question. Why hadn't I been affected by the depth yet? I slowly crawled from the tunnel, reaching blindly in front of me. I did not feel anything solid beyond the opening. I crawled a little further, still well aware that something had been in that tunnel with me, and I needed to get out. Further, my body half out, my balance became unsteady with another reach, and then I plummeted. It was a long enough fall for me to have the fleeting thought of, oh shit, along with a sudden slap of nausea. It wasn't long enough for me to yell or cry. See, when a person is startled, they don't tend to belt out a scream like the movies might have you believe. It's almost as if the opposite happens, like terror shoots down your throat, frightens your vocal cord, and then jolts your unsuspecting heart. I hit the water like a boulder, sinking deep, fast. I was conscious, and as far as I could tell through the adrenaline, mostly uninjured. But it was dark. So dark that I wasn't quite sure I'd actually opened my eyes, which way was up. I exhaled some bubbles I couldn't see, but I could feel. I followed the sensation, kicking my legs and pulling with my arms. I swam desperately toward the surface. It was a long swim and my lungs were aching, or maybe they were empty. I hadn't had the opportunity to suck in a breath prior to the fall. Please don't drown, I thought, now when you've gotten this far. I breached the surface, coughed out salt water, and hungrily inhaled air. I wasn't going to drown. For now, at least. That was the good news. But a faint light had appeared overhead. Not a torch or flame. A white light, like the moon. Reassuring at first glance, however, as I peered across the water, I saw the light glimmered off wet stone walls. I was still inside the tower. My hope was shattered. I felt stupid for ever expecting that traveling downwards would lead me to the surface. That didn't make any damn sense. And not only was I still in the tower, I also no longer had the sword. I dropped it when I made contact with the water. Fuck! I shouted at the top of my lungs. The feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and fear had all boiled over into a cocktail of rage. My exasperated roar reverberated throughout the chamber. I floated in the water, angrily panting. I was tired and frustrated. I wanted so desperately for it to be over. I wanted to see Hannah again. But then I saw something. No. I saw someone. Ahead. Someone was floating on the other side of the chamber, quietly watching me. A man, bearded like the others. "Hey!" I yelled out to him. He did not answer. I swam in place for a moment and considered what my next move would be. Should I swim to the stranger, or try to avoid him? So far, no one had attempted to harm me, not even the wolf, so why not go to him? But I didn't need to, because as soon as I had that thought, he moved towards me. His head remained above the water, eyes locked onto me. I noticed more movement from the periphery, and glanced away from the man. There was a woman, too. She was swimming toward me, just like the man. Same breaststroke and wide-eyed gaze. As they got closer, I realized that the water was rippling more heavily than you'd expect from two people swimming. The water was moving from them like they were whales swimming across the surface. And that's when I saw how large their heads were. I began to plan my retreat, but to where? There were no doors or stairs that I could see. The man and woman came to a halt and floated several yards from me. Even from that distance, it was clear that these were not humans, or at least not like any I'd ever seen. Their heads alone were the size of my entire body. Their eyes were large and unblinking, not wide with fear, more like they were trying to stare into my soul. I couldn't find any words. These couldn't be prisoners, right? The man spoke, his voice like gentle thunder.
Hell says to take you to the bottom.
What I heard was hell, thinking that my greatest fear had just been realized. Something suddenly grabbed a hold of my ankle and yanked me underwater. I was hurriedly pulled downwards. I struggled desperately to escape, but I was being pulled too quickly and with too much force. All of a sudden, my other ankle was snagged. I was being pulled faster, deeper. They were too strong. I couldn't get away. There was zero visibility in the pitch-black depths of the water. Like before, I had been caught off guard and unable to inhale before being submerged. My lungs were hurting once again and they weren't slowing down. Maybe I was going to drown after all. Then, abruptly, we stopped. I noticed a nearing glow from above. I glanced toward it, and could see that the moon-like orb from earlier had moved into the water, and was now illuminating my surroundings. Everything was blurry, as is expected while underwater, but I could finally see. I was surrounded by women, all nude, all beautiful. They weren't mermaids, if you were wondering, although at this point I wouldn't have been surprised. They looked like human women. There was a peacefulness. I always found being underwater relaxing, an escape from the madness above the surface, calm and quiet. I began to wonder, was I dying? Were these angels? Reality sunk its fangs back into me. I was dying, but first I had to drown, and that wasn't going to be easy. My body began to convulse. My vision began to fade. The temptation to inhale water was growing. Just get it over with, I thought. Breathe it in. As deep as I was, swimming to the surface in time was impossible. I was going to die, and these women were going to watch. I closed my eyes and said a silent apology to Hannah, and surrendered. But I didn't breathe in water. Rather, air was given to me. My eyes shot open. One of the women had her mouth pressed to mine and was refilling my lungs. My vision was coming back. My body was still. My rapidly beating heart began to calm. She pulled away and smiled. I looked at the women floating around me and counted 7 of them. The giants swam above, observing, the orb of light between them. Suddenly, my legs were jerked beneath me, and I was being pulled to the bottom again. Fear raced back into my mind, but the light was following us and I could see. 2 women were pulling me, making it 9 women in total, not counting the female giant. How were they able to swim so fast? We were rushing through the water. I noticed that the 7 other women were keeping pace alongside us, and above were the giants and the orb, following. We were moving like a tornado through the water. Again, I had the fleeting thought of, why wasn't I being affected by the depth? Going that deep should have been deadly. I could see that we were darting towards a grayish, twisting structure that followed along the entire circumference of the chamber, and then overlapped and went between itself, almost like a giant knot. Then, it moved. As we got closer, I was able to make out exactly what I was looking at. My impulses kicked in. Swim back up! I swung my arms fast and wide, trying to get away, but the women were pulling me with too much force. They were dragging me towards a giant serpent. Bubbles raced from my mouth as I cried out in terror. The menacing yellow eyes of the beast hungrily watched us descend towards it. There was nowhere for us to go. The serpent took up the entire remainder of the chamber. We were getting closer, and it became apparent just how enormous the serpent actually was. Bigger than any whale I'd ever seen, bigger than the wolf from the previous chamber. This had to be the biggest creature to have ever existed. Closer, almost touching it at this point, I braced for what would come next. And then, it shifted, creating space in the center. We rushed between the coiled serpent, and I could finally see what looked like an opening in the center of the stone bottom. But it didn't make any sense. How was I going to get out of the water? I would have to go up for air, not down, right? I was being pulled towards a black void. My lungs were aching again. Whatever waited on the other side, I was going to need air again soon. Finally, we reached the opening. The women let go of me, leaving me floating directly above it. "Come to me," I heard from the blackness below, with a clarity one would not expect to hear underwater. Was he in there? The one who awaits upon the throne of blood and bone? "Come to me," the voice said again. I glanced up. The women, the giants, the serpent. They were all watching me, waiting for my next move. I swam into the void.